it's interesting looking back at how much you just absorb from continually looking and continually, not necessarily analysing, but absorbing and respecting, I guess, and appreciating the work that's been created. Yeah, so I think it sort of all shapes your vision for the sort of photography you wish you could take yourself, and then somehow emulate some of that.
Hello, and welcome to the She Clicks Women in Photography podcast. I'm Angela Nicholson, and I'm the founder of She Clicks, which is a community for female photographers. In these podcasts, I talk with women in the photographic industry to hear about their experiences, what drives them, and how they got to where they are now. Our guest today is Anna Sparham, Curator of Photography for the National Trust. She cares for images from the historic to the contemporary and is the curator of 100 photographs from the collections of the National Trust, a book drawn from the Trust's 500,000-strong archive. Hello, Anna. Thank you for joining me on the She Clicks Women in Photography podcast today. It's lovely to see you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it's great. Thank you. Now, where did your interest in photography start?
Oh, it's a long story. Pretty much all my life. My now retired photography teacher dad, I guess he was the biggest influence very early on. So I remember being in the darkroom for the first time, probably about the age of 5.
Oh, wow.
In his school. But I'm not going to pretend I've been practicing photography since then. Definitely not. I did a GCSE in photography at school. I went to foundation and then Nottingham Trent University and studied for a degree there. And yeah, it's always been that passion really that I always wanted to have in my life. I think I sort of knew at university that I didn't necessarily want to be a professional photographer, but I always knew that I wanted to work with it and not lose the joy, I suppose, that I thought maybe a job as a photographer might be, which is awful to say, but at the time that was my thinking. Yeah, so it's been there throughout my life.
And did going to Nottingham Trent University shape how you thought about photography, that you were going to be more interested in the photographs, the history and the heritage, or did you know that before you started the course?
I remember choosing Nottingham because it was much more sort of fine art focused course. I never thought I was particularly technical. And obviously in any photography course, you're learning the technicals. But I really tuned into that conceptual thinking. I got into the sort of history and inspiration and influences that kind of drive your own style and interests. Yeah, I think I recognise that that's what that course gave me. Having said that, it also gave me, really luckily, in terms of a career, I was at that sort of hybrid of analog and digital. So I did learn how to use Photoshop and how to scan, and all of that was really crucial for me to get my first job in the industry. But yeah, that's, I think, the area that most interested me.
And how did you find your first job in the industry?
I started by getting in as in a picture agency in Birmingham. Mm-hmm. So I, was very lucky. I wrote basically very naively and sort of, as you do at like 21, boldly wrote to people. So I got into a picture agency and then I wrote to a museum director down in Bristol. And as I say, shared the fact that I had this photography knowledge, that I knew what to do with scanning and things like that, and copyright especially. And I think I just struck lucky, completely lucky. He was after those kind of skills at that moment in time. So I'm always a bit embarrassed about that because there's so much competition to get into the sector. But I guess in my defense, you can only, you have to make it happen either way. And I was kind of proactive in that way. And so I learned a lot very early on that first job, that sort of foot in the door, as it were. And then after a couple of years of that, I moved to London, and my real kind of learning in the industry came at the Museum of London, now called the London Museum, rebranded, where I spent 15 years basically learning the ropes.
How did that shape your vision of your career?
I think I knew that I loved working with both historic and contemporary photography. That's always been the real sort of magic for me, is that you can look after and care for historic collections, and there's so much to learn, there's so much to interpret, that's very subjective, but there's also so much that you just take in, in terms of style, in terms of approach from photographers, and then take that to how you read and work with and liaise with contemporary photographers as well. And I think for myself, I guess for many years I didn't create my own photography beyond, the wonderful pictures you take of your children. And there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. I loved it. But I never had that personal photography project on the go until recently. And I think it's interesting looking back at how much you just absorb from continually looking and continually, not necessarily analysing, but absorbing and respecting, I guess, and appreciating the work that's been created. Yeah, so I think it sort of all shapes your vision for the sort of photography you wish you could take yourself, and then somehow emulate some of that.
Did you ever find it slightly overwhelming because you're seeing all these photographs of historic significance, important people, important events and all this sort of thing, and perhaps milestones in photography itself? Did you sometimes find that a bit overwhelming for your photography and that kind of made you shelve potential projects?
Completely. I remember doing an exhibition just after my first child in London called London Street Photography. And I remember feeling really inspired. I've been given this opportunity to co-curate an exhibition. And that's the best thing when you're doing an exhibition. You suddenly get, it might be a very specific field, but you're suddenly inspired by that specific field. And I remember thinking, right, okay, I'm going to pick up a camera. I'm going to go on the street. I'm going to try and do this. I absolutely could not do that. It really showed me what I can do and what I can't do. So yeah, you do definitely feel intimidated in some ways and overwhelmed certainly by just the wealth of creativity. And there's always that, I think, being, somewhere deep inside, being that photographer, you always want to be able to do that yourself. So you inevitably feel not jealousy, but you feel envy that somebody is out there doing that. And yeah, just being, I've met so many wonderful professional photographers, the big names, but through to those that are really just getting going. And it's just been so rewarding to kind of see them flourish or see them talk about their years in the field. It's been overwhelming, but very joyful.
I guess you've got a really good education and understanding in what makes a great photograph. And then if you're out in the street and you're holding your camera, sort of waiting for that to come along or trying to make it happen, it is quite hard. But also you need to kind of build up a bit of momentum with photography, don't you? And a bit of muscle memory and start taking the not so great images so that you can take some of the great ones too.
Absolutely that. I think with street photography at the time, it was very much, focused on those candid, perfect shots that just come into play. I personally don't do that. I personally have moved into landscape and nature and very much absorbing and immersing myself in that scene. And exactly as you say, a project I did before I took this job, I got an Arts Council grant for developing your creative practice because I really wanted to build that photography practice myself again, coupled with curation. And I spent, very much part-time, but spent a year immersed in my local park in Sutton Park. And if I did that every day, you absolutely build up your eye, your style, your confidence, and just become completely immersed in it. And so, yeah, you definitely can't just pop out and get the same hit. Of course, you can get lucky, but yeah, you don't get the same reward or satisfaction, or obviously the sort of results you're really hoping for. So, yeah, that is why I tell myself I'm doing this long-term personal project, because that's exactly it. I don't feel satisfied by the odd shot I might have taken one day. I've got to really build that up.
Would you like to tell us what your long-term project is?
So that is very much on Sutton Park. I started it with this Arts Council grant in 2021, and I had that year. I was freelancing as well, so it was very much part-time, but it was all about teaching myself how to use large format for the first time, through to cyanotype printing, and really just giving myself that opportunity to get out there again and do that. So it's more than sort of pictures of trees. It's trying to pick out the sort of real context and essence of the park. And I've sort of played with snapping people that I've met, but I think at the moment it's very much me still trying to find what it is I want out of that project. But what I also love about the park, this particular park, is how much it's attracted photographers over the years, and still does. I think even you had Verity Milligan talking about a little bit about it in the past as well. And I love that. I love that there's this hub that people enjoy and experience for all the other reasons outside of photography. but it's still this magnet for creativity, and something I hadn't really thought did exist when I started the project, and have since learned through history that it's been this real source of inspiration. So yeah, it's ongoing, but loving it.
Oh, fabulous. Please excuse this interruption. This episode is brought to you by Siwi, Europe's leading photo printing company, and their hero product, the Siwi Photo Book, that is the proud recipient of the Which Best Buy Award. You know those thousands of photos sitting on your phone or hard drive? With a Siwi Photo Book, you can turn your memories into a beautiful, high-quality album that you'll want to show off. Every page is fully customisable, and you can pick from a range of sizes, finishes and layouts, designing every detail with their easy-to-use editor or let their smart assistant help. So if you're ready to do something real with your photos, head over to siwi.co.uk. That's cewe.co.uk. OK, let's get back to the show. Now, you work for the National Trust. Mm-hmm. You're the Curator of Photography. How did you find that job?
So after I left London in 2019, and I was freelancing and doing the work that I just explained, the job came up. I had seen the similar post role come up a few years before, just as I left London, and had sort of wanted to go for it then, but in that relocation time, it wasn't the right moment. It came up as a temporary maternity cover. And I just felt at that moment in time, I was ready to kind of step into another large institution and take to it all the experience I had to date. So I've been there 3.5 years already. Can't believe that. Yeah, and it's good being based in Birmingham because my job requires me to travel quite a bit to different properties across England, Wales and Northern Ireland. So that turned out well. And yeah, it's fascinating, and it's the sort of job you could have for life where you know that you'll never quite get to the bottom of everything that the trust holds, but there's just so many magnificent gems to pull out and really get your teeth into.
So what really is your role, and what is your typical day, if you have such a thing?
Obviously, I never have a typical day. So my role is really as an advocate for the collection. So our photography collections are scattered really across the country. They're in all of the different properties we have, most of the properties that we look after. So my role is to kind of investigate what we have and help our colleagues learn what we have, because photography's been the sort of underdog in terms of the collections. I'm not the first person to be in this role, but it's a new role in terms of a national perspective and having that national grasp of what we hold. So yeah, it's helping colleagues unearth what we have, understand what we have and appreciate it as well, and kind of look at photography in many ways, mostly primarily to help public engagement. So how can we make this photography more visible? What might it inspire for our visitors? And I think that works both internally and externally. So I don't hold the keys to all photography. I just help my colleagues work with what they have and think about how best to sort of draw that out and explore that. So a typical day might be me. Yesterday wasn't quite typical. I did spend 8 hours on a train, but I might be travelling to one property or another. I might be reporting on the collection they hold, sometimes for the first time from a curatorial perspective. I might be holding meetings about exhibition planning or research projects. I might be carrying out some research, which is lovely to do, of course, that sort of photo history research and joining the dots and, driving the clues really to what we hold and what we can do with it.
Yeah. Now, my perception is, and I might be wrong in this, that the National Trust seems to have gone through a bit of a change in its attitude towards photographers, because it used to be a little bit of a difficult relationship. And I do understand it, because obviously, you've got a valuable asset. And if people just come in and photograph it and then sell their photographs, then that is an issue. It's a commercial use of your properties. But it also used to be a little bit tricky if you wanted to take, just your own personal pictures just to remember a day out, maybe use a tripod occasionally, that kind of thing. But these days, that doesn't seem to be quite such an issue. And has there been a policy decision, or do you think, the number of mobile phones that people use these days and everyone taking pictures has sort of forced some relaxation?
I think without policy, there is an inevitable acceptance and understanding and appreciation and also benefit of watching your visitors photograph where they are. There is always going to be that line between commercial and for personal use, and that still stands. I personally don't get involved in the commercial side of things. My role is very much on the collections and the commercial wing, and how photographers approach the trust and the places they want to visit and take photography at isn't really my area, without sounding like I'm passing the buck. But it's but yeah, I think there is a general consensus that we want to encourage people to feel inspired by the places they're at. That is by and large aimed at the non-specialist and the personal photography that people want to take and obviously put on their social media. But the professional side of photography, yeah, there's still that policy. And I think over time, I would imagine that the sort of general ethos of the trust and the direction we're going in making things as accessible as possible is going to broaden. I'm sure of that.
Great. So what surprised you most about your role when you took up your job with the National Trust?
I don't think you can ever quite grasp the scale of the National Trust. I know it sounds ridiculous because I knew it was across all three nations, but it's the scale and the number of people you work with. So unlike my previous role in a museum where I had one collection, I forget how many, 20, 30,000 photographs maybe, I have forgotten. Here you're looking at 500,000 scattered across the country. So there's that of I can't possibly see them all and I can't put my hands on them all. And so there's that bit of distance to get my head around. But yeah, I think mainly just the opportunity and the potential that lies in those collections is so vast. I mean, we all know how accessible photography can be as a medium. And I love the fact that they don't sit in silo either. They can really connect with many other collection aspects that we have, whether that's interiors or whether that's costume. There's so many ways in which you can draw those stories out and connect them with perhaps the more obvious collections that people are expecting to visit.
Okay. Now, with that in mind, you're saying how many images there are and how many properties and all this sort of thing. How on earth did you manage to create the book, 100 Photographs from the Collections of the National Trust?
It was a great challenge to have. I love working with books, I have to say. It was lovely to be told pretty much on my first day, you're going to be producing this book. So from the start, I've always said it's not a best of. It's not the top 100. It's a starting point. It's a kind of way in for people to realise the breadth of what we hold. So practically speaking, it meant navigating as much of our database, our collections database, as I could, knowing that I couldn't possibly get everywhere against the timeline that we had. But I did visit, I don't know, at least 30 places, some of which you're diving in very much for the first time. You might have found an album is listed on our database, but nobody's had the time yet to look into the individual photographs. So it was being very intuitive as to what I could find if I took the time to go and visit a place. So having to kind of preempt what I might find. It might be a description of a photograph that I know, bringing my knowledge to it, could be a really famous photograph by a really famous photographer, and that did happen. But it was also about finding the real unsung, the amateur photographers where you kind of think, actually, I'm not sure this has been given the time of day, or really wanting to kind of shed a light, shine a light even on those photographers and the work they were creating. So it was really challenging, obviously, and inevitably once you've printed it, there are dozens of other photographs you've found since that you'd love to put in for volume 2. But yeah, I very much saw it as a real opportunity to show the breadth of imagery, but also the material qualities and the different types of photography we hold. The book is roughly chronological, so you have to meet certain criteria, a certain amount from a certain period, or make sure there's a real breadth across the three nations as well. So that does dictate your selection process. But I just wanted to have interesting, intriguing images that had great stories attached. And so it was hunting the stories out alongside the images, which was the real job.
Do you have any favourites amongst those photos, either because of their historic significance or who or what's in them or the story behind them?
I had a feeling you might ask me that, and it's always the hardest of questions because you feel so wedded, whether it's an exhibition or a book, they become like your children. You become so wedded to these images. I have a few. There's a beautiful image in Arlington, down in Devon, with an amateur photographer, Rosalie Chichester. She was the sort of lady of the house, and she photographed her flowers, which I presume she collected from the garden and arranged as still lives. And they're very sumptuous, very beautiful, very, simple in their approach, but beautifully staged. I have, let me think, there's Anna Atkins. I've just realised I'm tuning into women without actually genuinely intending to. Anna Atkins, so I don't know, early cyanotype photographer. So many. I think a lovely picture of Muhammad Ali by Neil Kenlock. That was a surprise to find at the Children's Country House at Sudbury. And they'd recently acquired that print as part of a funding project a few years ago, sort of expanding our vision of children and childhood. So Muhammad Ali is meeting lots of children in a school in Croydon. And so that was wonderful. Just so many landscapes, trees, the sort of things that, I'm drawn to, but I know that our visitors are also going to find connection to.
That's interesting. So the Muhammad Ali picture didn't really have a direct connection to a National Trust property or the National Trust itself. It was somebody had acquired it because of its significance with children.
It's about expanding the narratives of each of these places. In a traditional sense, and in many cases, collections are born from the family that might have lived at a property, or in the case of, say, the Hardman's House Studio in Liverpool, it's all about their business. It's life and home and their studio business. So, they're usually connected very directly to the property, but not always. If a photograph might appear that's about the local community or the area, or perhaps around servant life, or, in the case of Muhammad Ali, very much about expanding what it means to be a child and the excitement around childhood. And in that case, around who are your heroes or heroines, So I think that was the justification at that time for adding a particular work to a particular place. And I personally, it's what I've always done in my career. I've supported acquisitions and really thought about, what does this new acquisition bring now, but what does it bring forever and in the future? And that's something that I'd certainly support and hope can happen increasingly so at the Trust, as well as, of course, understanding what we already hold.
Obviously, some of the photographs, or a lot of the photographs in the collection, are extremely old. Mm-hmm. How do you balance that need to preserve them with the desire to display them?
Yeah, it's a real challenge. I think in the past, pre my role, the photographs that we hold haven't been as displayed as much as you might expect. They've been reproduced and shared a little. But it's always been conservation is sort of the priority, and preservation's the priority. What we do is hit that balance where we can. So we mitigate as much as possible environmentally. You have to take your lux readings. You have to present as carefully as you possibly can and think about the hours you're displaying something. But the real priority is getting these photographs seen. And sometimes that means reproducing, of course it does, and digital access. But my heart, of course, lies in getting people to appreciate and understand and enjoy the original objects where you can, especially things like daguerreotypes, that, as you say, the early material. Sometimes it's vulnerable, sometimes it's not. It depends on the material nature of the object. So even if you're only displaying something for 3 months, as long as you can do the most you possibly can with that and build some engagement around it, that's all good. We still have, in fact, an exhibition at Polesden Lacey of Alice Hughes platinum prints. And so they are like 1900, and platinums being so stable that they're good. They can go out on display, so they're up for 6 months. And it's wonderful to have people see original photographs. And for me, that's second nature, but for some people in a trust environment, that's quite new and quite novel. So that's gone down really well.
Great. How long is that exhibition on for?
I think it's till November. I think it's the beginning of November.
Till November.
I hope that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Well, I think that's a really good time to go to 6 from She Clicks.
Okay.
I've got 10 questions from She Clickers, and I'd like you to answer 6 questions, please, by picking numbers from 1 to 10. So could I have your first number, please?
I'll go with number 7.
Number 7. This is an interesting one. In the pre-digital era, the volume of photographs being taken was much lower. So any that survive feel more precious when put next to the high volume of the digital era, that is. For a national archive, how do you go about selecting which images are added now when you could be dealing with thousands of similar images rather than in the olden days when you just had a few? That's from Carolina.
Every museum, every institution has to be incredibly selective for very boring reasons, just like storage. But yeah, it's really difficult. I think for me, it's about how, if you're bringing in a new image, a new acquisition, it's about how it connects to the existing works and what it truly says and can do for any messages we're trying to engage with, any stories we're trying to engage with. So sometimes you can have incredibly beautiful, strong series of works, but it really is about how it truly connects to that particular collection, existing collection, and how many different avenues, how many different stories it might convey. So yeah, it is really hard. I mean, I would say of course the numbers are completely different. Of course they are. But I've always been so keen to look at the broader editing process. So, contact sheets have always been there in my exhibitions. They're my friend. I want people to see that you didn't just necessarily have these solo images like a daguerreotype. You had people producing film after film after film as well. So yeah, it's a really tricky one. I love that question. It's a forever problem for any current contemporary curator, of course. Yeah.
I guess a lot of the images you get now, current images or new images, are digital. So storage is slightly different.
It is if you're a museum that's equipped to acquire digital-born images, and some museums are. In the past, in the London Museum, we were not quite at that stage when I was working there. And yeah, exactly. You've got to not only supply the storage, you've got to continually migrate that technology and pay for and consider the environmental considerations as well. So it is, at one stage we were acquiring digitally created images, but ensuring we printed them to have that preservation and to have that opportunity for display, the print that the photographer approved of, etc. So yeah, it's a forever problem, but I'm sure some of the institutions will be dealing with that very differently. The V&A, for example.
Okay. Can I have your second number, please?
Number 3.
Have you ever uncovered a photo that completely changed your understanding of a place or a moment in history? That question's from Jeanette.
That's a lovely question. I can think of, this is literally from the top of my head. I can think of one. So an exhibition I worked on with the photography of Christina Broom. She was a photographer of soldiers and suffragettes. That was effectively the title of the exhibition. And I know she was sort of renowned for being this photographer of the suffragettes, and therefore everyone assumed that she was a suffragette herself, or at least a suffrage supporter. And a lot of the research that I did led to realising that she wasn't necessarily. This was about her commercial practice. This was her ensuring that she had a business, so she would create these photographs and sell them to suffrage supporters. There's one particular photograph where in fact, it's on the wall behind me. She photographed women that had marched from across the country, and they came together to do this big pageant march. And they're all holding banners in support of suffrage campaign. But there's a man right in the centre of the photograph. Now, I'd only really seen this photograph as a glass plate negative. So first of all, you're having to register what you're looking at as a negative. Yeah. It was only when it was enlarged on screen digitally that you could read the board in the middle that the man's holding, and he's anti-suffrage. And It's things like that where you just, you see the multi-layers that are going on in this picture, whether she realised it or not. And I'd like to think, because he's right in the centre, perhaps she did realise and she'd sort of placed these two together. He's laughing, so there's this sort of edge to it. But yeah, it's that reminder. You can never quickly look at a photograph historically. You've got to really interpret it, really look at the detail and not make assumptions.
Oh, fascinating. Right, could I have your third number, please?
Number 1.
Number 1. Is there a National Trust property that has a significance in history for photography, similar to Laycock Abbey and Fox Talbot or Demola Lodge and Julia Margaret Cameron? That's another question from Jeanette, actually.
Okay, I would say the Hardman Studio in Liverpool. It's an obvious one in some ways because it's a house that belonged to photographers. They ran their commercial studio practice there. But I think it's a good example of how trust properties are not always, the country house model. So Harbans House in Liverpool, it's a mid-century studio preservation of both their home life and their studio practice. And we hold 150,000 plus photographs and business archive records off-site at Liverpool Record Office. And we're doing tons of work to kind of really draw out the many layers and stories that collection holds. And it's significant because it's, an intact, completely intact studio collection. It tells you how the business was running, when it was failing, where the challenges were for those photographers, where their life overlaps with work, and the sort of measures they took, the commercial decisions, all sorts of things, and their fascination in photography as a field, personally as well as commercially. So yeah, there's so much I think that can throw upon photo history, how it connects with other studios, but also just how it connects to ordinary people and, going to pose for your photograph in a studio. So yeah, really important one.
That sounds like a great venue for a SheClicks meetup.
Definitely. I
have to sort that out. Yes. Okay. Your fourth number, please.
Number 2.
We all have personal preferences when it comes to photography. You've curated a lot of different exhibitions for different organisations. How difficult is it to put your own preferences to one side when selecting photographs for these? That question's from Helen.
That's a lovely question. Yeah, it is, well, I see it as every curator is going to bring their own stamp to something, bring their own subjective selection process to it to some extent. But for me, you've always got to put the visitor at the forefront. And a lot of the places I've worked at, not exclusively, but a lot of them, the exhibition is most likely aimed at a non-specialist. So for me, it's always been, if I'm choosing a photograph, what's it going to say? Am I not being too clever? I don't need to be too clever. What's this sequence show? What does this individual photograph convey to a non-specialist? That's my priority. And as I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of that has been also in getting people excited around the material qualities of a photograph. So as I say, always put contact sheets in where I can, or glass negatives. It's getting people to think about how and why this photograph was created and enjoying that, and perhaps more than me saying, oh, I love that photograph of a tree, so you do have to put it to one side, but it's inevitable that it's part of it. And as long as you've got that visitor in mind at the forefront, then that's a good magic, I think.
Great. Okay. Can I have your penultimate number, please?
I'll go with 9 then. Thank you.
Number 9. What is the most memorable acquisition you've been involved in? That question's from Liz.
Ooh, so many. I'm going to run with a photographer called Bob Collins, who was a sick 1950s, 1960s photographer. And I think it was his nephew that sort of arranged a meeting with me at the London Museum, very much with not the assumption that I must take this collection on. It was more of, I don't know if you'll be interested, almost apologetic to get in touch. And it was the most remarkable set of photography, negatives. There were largely negatives and then eventually came prints as well. Beautiful, beautiful shots in London, largely street photography, from Wimbledon through to the beat clubs, all sorts of things that he was really into. And it was just wonderful to see the transition of these negatives that had been, they were slightly smelly. They'd been stored in a box in the loft. His uncle had long since died. Taking that acquisition on and the work of going through and cataloguing and really building that up through to exhibition is something that is always so satisfying, because I remember him, the donor, walking into the room and seeing this exhibition and being absolutely stunned. I thought he didn't like it, but he was just like motionless. He couldn't speak.
Oh, wow.
So there's things like that where you think, actually, this would have ended up I don't know where. And now I'm repeatedly seeing it actually on social media being really shown and used. So that's enjoyable. Christina Broom was another one, I have to say. We really added to our collection there. And for me, that was so much more on a personal level, so much more than just adding an acquisition of significance. It meant that I was really able to explore a woman photographer and her history, biographically as well as her work. So that really kickstarted a lot for me. But yeah, it's so lovely to know that you've played a part anyway in just getting some collections preserved in perpetuity, and hopefully people get to see them.
I imagine you must have had goosebumps when the owner of those pictures saw his uncle's work in the exhibition.
Yeah, I just thought, oh my God, he hates it. He hates what I've done.
Yeah.
And then he sort of stepped away and said, I just need a few moments, And I realised he was so emotional. I don't think I'd ever encountered someone, because often an acquisition might be a living photographer and they're thrilled to have their work in the collection. Of course they are. But it's a different sort of response. So I wasn't ready for that. But yeah, it was a reminder of how important, preserving these works are.
Okay. Right. So your final number, please.
I'll go with number 8.
What is the part of your job that you think someone would be most surprised about? That question's from Liz.
Most surprised? I imagine that people think curating is, constantly looking at lovely photographs and playing with them. They'd probably be surprised at how administrative it can be, which is a really dull answer. So I need to think of something very much more lovely than that. Perhaps it's the amount of collaborative work that you do, that it's not just you and a box of photographs. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it really is me in a dark corner of a building looking at a collection for the first time, and that's wonderful. But it's actually that sharing of your knowledge. And so yeah, I think I work with so many people today that overwhelms me sometimes, but it's a brilliant thing to be able to kind of just share that little bit, even if it's a tiny little drop in the ocean of photography knowledge with a variety of people at different areas and levels of the trust. So perhaps it's that. Yeah, I probably liaise with 100 people a week, just within the trust, I mean.
So it's more social than a lot of people might think.
I think that's it. It's not, you're not in a store. I don't have a store now. So if I am visiting a store, yes, you'll have that. But yeah, you are right. It is far more social and far more engaging, I think, than people might anticipate.
Oh, fabulous. Well, Anna, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's been really fascinating hearing from you.
Thank you so much. It's a quite novel thing to talk about your work and not just be doing it. So yeah, really enjoyed it.
Great.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for listening to this episode of the She Clicks Women in Photography podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Special thanks to everybody who sent in a question. You'll find links to Anna's social media channels in the show notes. I'll be back with another episode soon, so please subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast platform and tell all your friends and followers about it. You'll also find She Clicks on Facebook, X, Instagram and YouTube if you search for She Clicks Net. So until next time, enjoy your photography.